On December 24, 1971, a passenger plane carrying 92 people was flying above the Amazon rainforest. Outside, a violent storm swallowed the sky. Lightning flashed, thunder roared. Rain hammered against the aircraft. Then a bolt of lightning struck the plane. Seconds later, the aircraft began tearing apart thousands of feet above the jungle. Passengers were thrown into the darkness below. For the rescue teams, there was almost no hope. Nobody could survive a disaster like that. At 11 days later, a 17-year-old girl emerged from Amazon rainforest alive. Not from a rescue helicopter, not from a siege party, she walked out on her own. How did she survive a fall from the sky? How did she survive 11 days alone in one of the deadliest jungles on earth? This is the incredible true story of a 17-year-old girl. And her name was Juliane Koepcke. To understand what happened, we need to return to Christmas Eve 1971. 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke was traveling with her mother aboard Lancer Flight 508. The flight had already been delayed because of the bad weather. Many passengers were eager to get home for Christmas. Nobody imagined they were boarding a flight that would soon become one of the history's most remarkable survival stories. As the aircraft crossed Amazon basin, the weather continued to worsen. Dark storm clouds surrounded the plane. Rain hammered against the windows. Lightning flashed repeatedly through the darkness. Inside the cabin, tension began to grow. Then came the lightning strike. The aircraft jolted violently. Passengers cried out. Luggage burst from overhead compartments. The cabin descended into chaos. Then came a sound nobody ever wants to hear. The sound of an aircraft breaking apart. One moment, Juliane was sitting beside her mother. The next, she was falling. Still strapped to a row of 3 seats, Juliane occupied the middle seat. Around her, the pieces of the aircraft tumbled through the storm. Rain rushed past. Clouds raced by. Below her lay nothing but endless rainforest. Then everything went black. When Juliane regained consciousness, sunlight filtered through the trees above. For several moments, she couldn't understand where she was. Then the reality returned. The crash had happened, and somehow she was alive. The row of the seats had fallen with her. The thick seat cushions had absorbed much of the impact. Above her stretched the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest. Branch after branch had broken her descent before she finally reached the forest floor. A fall that should have been impossible to survive had somehow become survivable. Now came the real challenge. Juliane was injured, alone, and lost in the Amazon rainforest. Her collarbone was broken. Cuts and bruises covered her body. One eye was swollen, almost shut. Every movement caused pain. She called out for her mother. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. Only the sounds of the rainforest replied. Birds called overhead. Insects buzzed through the vegetation. Leaves rustled somewhere beyond the sight. Slowly, the reality became impossible to ignore. She was alone. For a moment, situation felt hopeless. Then she remembered something her father had taught her years earlier. A simple rule for surviving in the Amazon. If you ever become lost, follow the water. Small streams become larger streams. Larger streams become rivers. And rivers eventually lead to people. At first, it was only a memory, a small piece of hope. But all she had was just that hope. So Juliane began searching. Every step sent pain through her injured body. The rainforest pressed in from every direction. The heat was exhausting. The vegetation was dense. Yet she kept moving. Then she heard it, a faint sound, water. She followed the sound, and soon she found a small stream winding through the jungle. To most people, it would have seemed insignificant. To Julian, it was everything. For the first time since the crash, she had a direction, a purpose, a chance. So she began following the stream. Every day, the water guided her deeper through the rainforest. The stream slowly became larger, then larger still, exactly as her father had said. But the rainforest was never forgiving. The Amazon is one of the largest rainforests on the earth. Whenever snakes, dangerous insects live among the trees, predators move unseen through the jungle. Even healthy adults can become lost there. Julian knew this. She had spent much of her childhood around the rainforest because her parents were geologists who studied the Amazon. Those years of experience now became her greatest advantage. Whenever the jungle felt unsafe, she became cautious. Sometimes she stopped moving, sometimes she hid and waited. Strange sounds often echoed through the trees. Branches cracked in the distance. Leaves rustled where she could not see. The rainforest constantly reminded her that she was not alone. And when night arrived, the rainforest became even more intimidating. Darkness swallowed the jungle. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Animals called from places she could not see. Branches snapped somewhere in the distance. Julian could do little except wait for morning, alone, injured, surrounded by an endless wilderness. At each sunrise brought the same decision, keep moving. So every morning she continued following the water. The days slowly passed. She was hungry, exhausted, injured, completely alone, and she refused to stop. Meanwhile, rescue teams searched desperately for survivors. Aircraft flew above the sections of the rainforest. Search crews combed the difficult terrain, but the Amazon is enormous. Finding the survivors of the crash in the dense canopy was almost impossible. Julia knew none of this. As far as she knew, nobody was coming. The only thing she could do was keep moving. Then one day, she noticed something disturbing. One of her wounds had become infected. When she examined it more closely, she made a horrifying discovery. Maggots were living inside the injury. Most people would have panicked. But Julian focused on survival. One step, then another, then another. The days blended together. The rainforest seemed endless. But on the 11th day, everything changed. Julian spotted something unusual. A boat. At first, she could hardly believe it. After so many days alone, it seemed impossible. And there it was, a real boat. And where there was a boat, there had to be people. For the first time since the crash, she knew she might actually survive. Soon afterward, local workers found the exhausted teenager and brought her to safety. Her ordeal was finally over. But the most astonishing part of the story was still to come. When the investigators completed their search, they confirmed an incredible fact. Out of the 92 people aboard Flight 508, Juliane Koepcke was the only survivor and the only one. A 17-year-old girl who survived a plane breaking apart in mid-air. A teenager who survived a fall from the sky, and a young woman who survived 11 days alone in the Amazon rainforest. More than 50 years later, her story remains one of the greatest survival stories ever recorded. Not because she never felt fear, but because when everything around her seemed hopeless, she kept moving forward, one step at a time, and sometimes that is enough to survive. Because on Christmas Eve in 1971, when the Amazon rainforest seemed to climb an entire aircraft, everyone believed the story had ended. But 11 days later, Juliane Koepcke walked out of the forest and into history.